Hi, everyone. We're really happy to be here, and thanks again, Joe, for the ambiance. Where did Joe go? Oh, there's Joe. So if it's all right with you, we thought we would start just with a little bit of breathing and grounding together. And breathing is one of the things that we're actually going to be talking about as well. But I kind of just like to start by grounding and just reminding ourselves that breathing actually is always a communal activity that we do together. So I'm going to start by inviting a bell. So breathing in, I know I am breathing in. And breathing out, I know I am breathing out. In and out. Breathing in, I am aware of my whole body. Breathing out, I calm my body. Aware of my body, calming my body. Breathing in, I imagine the multitudes of life that have made it possible for this air that we are breathing to exist. My inhale as a way to connect to all of those other bodies and life forms and organisms, their memories, their dreams, their stories. And breathing out, I remember to let go of that air I have drawn in, effortlessly letting go of that life force in order to draw in a new breath and to write a new story. Connecting to life, writing a new story. And breathing in, I see that every breath exists as an in-between space, as both coming and going, as both life and death, as both and neither. Breathing out, I settle into this in-between space, acknowledging how my own existence and creative practice is constantly oscillating in the in-between and everything. In between, everything. Breathing in, I dislodge the stories carried in my body. I read the past differently, and I begin to see it all differently. Breathing out, I learn to shapeshift, to rearrange myself, my memories, to revision my own body and what it carries differently. Dislodging stories, shapeshifting. So as you come back to your normal breaths, I invite you to make any gentle movements your body might need right now. So if you need to stretch or shake or resettle, please feel welcome to do so. And I just want to read a quote by Emmanuel Colchia, who's the author of A Life of Plants. And he writes, to inhale is to allow the world to come into us. The world is in us, and to exhale is to project ourselves into the world that we are. To breathe is to let oneself be penetrated by the world in order to make from the world something that is also made from our breaths. So one of the things that I think Lydia and I are asking today is, how many times in your life have you had to bring yourself back to life? And how might we consider the beauty of those shape-shifting moments and not just the despair? Right? And both of us as writers and humans, I think, have had to shuttle back and forth between the realms of life and death many times, both in physical space and story space. So today we are sharing a little bit of our stories through two of our favorite creatures. And so our hope is to think a little bit more about what it might mean to shapeshift, both in our bodies and our lives, but also really in the stories that we tell. So, Lydia.
Thank you, Janice. Janice and I have been working together for years now, and I kind of have become one with Janice, and I can't do anything without her around anymore. So it's like, I have to cook dinner. Can you come over? I have to get out of bed. Can you come over? Hello. Thank you for joining us here today. We're happy to be here corporeally in tandem. And so I meander when I talk, and I'm not sorry. But I have a tendency to bury the lead. So I'll tell you the lead. Breathing, shape-shifting. I'll just keep echoing exactly what Janice just said. When I think of the word and the concept and the motion of revival, for me personally, resuscitation comes to mind. And that's because I'm a lifelong swimmer. And so breathing and how one breathes and the difference between being underwater and not has been huge for me. Any other people who swim? So the other idea is with swimming, you don't have a choice. You have to figure out a way to make a rhythm of your breathing. I mean, you don't have to. It just goes smoother if you do, right? So there are other reasons revival and resuscitation kind of go together for me. And a couple of them have to do with life-death experiences that could be very sad stories, personal stories that we all experience. But I'm not speaking to the sadness of the story right now. But they're going to sound sad anyway. One is, as some of you are aware, I had a daughter who died the day she was born. And so that birth-death story and her moving from the waters of my body into the world kind of put images and metaphors and myths and feelings imprinted upon me the rest of my life. And her going from breathing water, as we all do before the breach, to a death cycle profoundly changed my understanding of life, as it might for many of you, or has. Are you still with me? So this idea in Western white culture of life and death as being on two ends of a line stopped making sense to me forever, because I held life and death in the same moment. And life and death instantly became, for the rest of my time here on earth, a circle, a cycle, waves, any words like those. So that's one kind of story. Another thing that happened in my actual life is my father, who was our abuser, drowned in the ocean. And you'd think, okay, that's the end of that story. But no. His daughter, the swimmer, resuscitated him. I don't know why I did that to this day, except that that's who I am. So he lived a while longer. Then he died, so everyone can breathe easy. But that largeness and loudness of what is breath got big for me in my life from that experience too. So when someone says the word revival to me and my brain goes to resuscitation, can you kind of see where I'm coming from? It's not that it's your life and your experience, but is this making a little sense? How the story came to be that for me? And then raise your hand if you've ever had to bring yourself back to life. In some ways, I think it's all of us. Because I think we're living, dying, living, dying, living, dying, living. And some experiences like grief and loss put you through it, whether you want to go through it or not. Correct? And so we have to think of ways to think about it and stories that will help carry us. And this is why metaphors and stories about existences non-human around us can help. And this is what brings me to the Asholat. My favorite creature on the planet. I almost can't make sentences about them because look. Whoa. These tiny water dragon beasts are astonishing. I mean, a lot of you know all about them. Some people don't. And look. So cool. They live their whole lives underwater, so check. Can love them. But they kind of have two superpowers from my point of view. Everything about them is astonishing, but two things about them that are amazing are that they can regenerate lost limbs or body parts, including pieces of their own nervous systems or hearts or eyes. It's a big deal. Can we swear? It's a big fucking deal. So if they lose an arm, they can grow a new one. But the nervous system and heart and eyes, that's intense. They can regrow tails. They can regrow extra limbs in case, I'm needing 3 arms today. I need a 3rd boob. I need no boobs. They're like Zen masters and mistresses of shapeshifting is what I'm getting at. And that's meaningful to me. The second superpower, from my point of view, is that they have 4 different ways of breathing. I'll try to remember them. They can breathe through their gills. They can breathe through their lungs. They can breathe through their skin. And then there's a fancy word for this, but I'll just describe the process. They can do that thing where they place a bubble at the surface of water and then go up to it and breathe it. That's just cute. I've tried it. Got water up my nose, doesn't work well with humans, but I'm working on it. And that breathing in more than one way idea, I'm bringing into our shared space because it helps me to remember that we might want to expand our definition of what it means to breathe. And when I think of our relation to creatures that can breathe 4 different ways, it encourages me to think about how many ways do I breathe? Or do we breathe together like we're doing right now? And what is breath? And how does breath move from me to you and beyond endlessly? And can we ease each other's breath? We can. If I'm walking in a forest and I think of breath and I look at trees, which, by the way, are the reason we can breathe, can we have that reminder? Thank you, trees, in spite of what we do to them. If I put my arms out like branches, I'm breathing. If I stand in front of the ocean, for me personally, that's the thing. That's like the heart of the matter. I clearly was supposed to be a water animal, and someone got mixed up and put me on land. I've got some years left here, but pretty soon maybe I'll return and it'll be okay again. When I stand personally in front of the ocean, it feels like, I know this isn't true, but it feels like my rib cage opens up. And I can breathe bigger and wider and less individual. I feel like I'm part of something bigger than myself, which is a concept I think you can understand. So my piece of what we're doing here together today is about how this creature and our imagined relationship to it can remind us to shape-shift our stories, our bodies. I'm going through, raise your hand if you're going through something difficult right now. I mean, besides the country losing all its limbs at once. So that's a lot of us, right? So I'm reconnecting to creatures that help me shape-shift the story and help me remember there's more than one way to breathe. Because I'm going to go through this death cycle, which is loss, which is grief, which is whatever the difficulty is. And I'm not alone. I'm next to someone else doing it, and we're sharing breath and shape-shifting, even in our strange differences. And then press your back against your chair. Can you feel your scapula? I would like you to encourage you to believe those are your new wings coming. Maybe you need something beyond human to bring to your body story. Seamlessly, we will now move toward Janice.
Seamlessly. My memory is not as good, so I have some notes that I'm going to glance at. But the other creature that we thought of is a tardigrade, which maybe some of you know about. And the tardigrade, for me, is a creature that really bridges life and death all of the time. And if you don't know the tardigrade, they're these tiny, tiny, tiny creatures that can be found in like every ecosystem. And they can survive super extreme conditions. So some species have actually survived in outer space, right? Being exposed to outer space. And one of the things that they can do is that when the conditions are so extreme, the reason why they can survive and why they've survived, all of these kind of world-ending events is that they can enter into this state called anabiosis or cryptobiosis. And what that basically means is like they shut down all of their life processes, so they're not breathing, their metabolism slows down almost to like nothing. And for all basic definitions of life, like you can't detect it. But they're not dead and they're not alive, right? And they can be revived, right? So they can stay like that for like 30 years and then basically you can like add water and then they come back to life, right? That's pretty magical, right? The other way that maybe you have heard about this creature is a giant tardigrade was recently featured in Star Trek Discovery, which I think is just really cool. And so that's what the giant tardigrade looks like. And this giant tardigrade is used by humans to navigate through this mycelial network, right? And so there's, in the show, there's a mycelial network that connects all of outer space, and this tardigrade is a creature who can navigate it. So the ship uses the aid of the tardigrade to basically travel between any point in space and actually time in the show, right? Almost instantaneously. And this is something that this tardigrade can do. And then later, other things happen. If you watch the show, I won't spoil it. And so this is a creature that to me teaches a lot about what it actually even means to think about life and death, like not as opposites, but as existing very simultaneously. And that actually even us as human creatures are always kind of existing in this both state or this in-between state, right? And it's not one or the other, right? It's not like birth and death as opposites. Like we're actually always living and dying at the same time, right? Currently, we are all dying because we're all living. They go hand in hand. And so for me, this creature also reminds me of the interconnectedness of everything, as breathing does, right? So when I was younger, when I was in college, I was really obsessed with the idea of liminal states, of liminality, right? It's the idea of boundaries or thresholds as transitional spaces. But at that time, at that age, for me, it was like just that, an idea. It was like the idea of liminal states really fascinated me. And then basically as I lived more, but also as I died more, which are the same thing, right? I started to understand that actually the liminal state, like I started to embody being in a liminal state more, so it became less and less abstract. And the liminal state itself actually became wider and wider, and so the extremes kind of just like disappeared and started to fade away, right? And I started to understand like, oh, the liminal state is not this space that's just in between things. It's like everything, and then all of the other things are just kind of there that we're categorizing for convenience, right? And that was really huge for me when I realized that, because it's when you settle into that, it can be a lot more comfortable to just realize, oh, I don't have to be this or this. Actually, I can be both. And actually, we're all always in both, right? All of the time. And then it makes it easier to breathe, actually, right? Otherwise, I was realizing I was holding my breath a lot, right? Or breathing too much, like hyperventilating. And so as someone who has experienced a lot of loss as well, both of my parents have passed, my dogs, as someone who also actually sees spirits often, right? The realms to me are often kind of overlapping, right? And I think of them actually as waves, right? Like if you have two bodies of water very close together and the waves are ebbing and flowing, but sometimes the waves are overlapping with each other, right? To me, that's kind of what reality is like. That sometimes that overlapping happens, and when two waves meet, then they create new ripples. And I'm thinking about story as well, right? We're talking about how these things might actually kind of give us tools and ways to rewrite story. So I'll tell you one example is, so there was a point where I was reminiscing and I was remembering, and this was something that a teacher had taught me, and I was remembering a pretty hard time from my childhood. And it was a moment where I don't even remember why I was so upset, but I very clearly remember being in my bed with the covers, crying. I was really alone, and I can feel that sense of being alone and not being seen very, very keenly, even though I don't quite even remember what caused it, right? But what we can do when we are in this liminal space and we understand it's not one or the other, and when we can time travel, like the tardigrade, right? we can go back. So like remembering is actually an act of time travel, right? It's not a static memory. Every time we remember, we're actually changing our relationship to it and we're entering that memory space. And so I was able to time travel back into that memory and bring with me actually two of my most beloved companions, my two dogs, Benny and Maggie, which I'm going to show you just because I wanted an excuse to show you the picture. So there's Benny and Maggie. And at the present moment of this remembering, both of these dogs had already passed away. And in the moment of my childhood, that past memory, neither of them had actually technically existed yet, okay? But I could bring them with me, and I was now in this memory space where under the covers with me were my super fluffy, very cute, adorable dogs, right? Benny, who actually has had many past lives, and his whole life he was very upset because he was actually like a philosopher in a past life. And so he actually had he was always giving me lots of wisdom, but like he couldn't speak it, so it was very frustrating for him. But they were there under the covers with me, and that changed everything, right? Because then I could time travel back into this present moment. And now I have the feeling of these two companions having been with me in this very hard, difficult moment. And so in this moment where I was actually carrying the feeling of aloneness and not being seen in my body, I was now carrying this memory of having my dogs be there in this really difficult time, knowing that I was supported and not alone in that one moment, right? And so that is a way of rewriting the story where then in the present moment, that was a different thing that I was carrying. And in carrying that, that changed my cells and it changed my body in that moment forward, right? And that's something that we do all of the time anyways, right? But it's something that we can do with intention, especially with these difficult moments, is changing our relationship to it. So what liminality is sometimes for me is an opportunity for reorientation through disorientation. And what I mean by that is that sometimes we're disoriented because of grief or because of loss or because of intense sadness. Like when I wake up in the morning, I'm super disoriented, right? I'm like, where am I? But that gives us an opportunity to have a totally different vantage point. Like when we're disoriented, we have to figure out how to find our bearings. But we can have agency over how we're doing that. And in doing that, we're now creating a new orientation altogether, right? And that in itself is a form of shapeshifting. So one other story I'll share is one of the things that has happened is last year I got to be on sabbatical. For a whole year I was on sabbatical, which is an intense privilege. It's actually the first time in my life that I had like time off. So it felt, I had a lot of guilt about it. But during that time, I actually hardly got any writing done. I slept a lot. I watched a lot of Korean dramas. I caught up on all of my Netflix. I hugged my dog a lot. I cried a lot. That's what they don't tell you when you go on something like sabbatical and you have free time. Everything that you've been suppressing for your whole life starts to come out, right? It was like months and months of crying and wailing. And then I was like, oh, everyone needs to go on sabbatical for like 7 years because we all have at least a year worth of crying to get out. But what happened, it was like kind of like my own state of creative antibiosis, right? Like I was kind of in this liminal state of like not really doing anything, but I was doing something. And what I realized was I was doing a lot of processing of grief in a way that I couldn't do when I didn't have that space for it. And so my mother, who passed away over a decade ago, is someone who comes up in my writing all of the time. And something that I always think about with her is like all of the ways that she impacted me, right? All of the ways she saw me or didn't see me. And I'm always thinking of it like one directionally. But something happened when in this rest place, I was able to hold her grief differently in my body as my grief. And I started to actually see through her eyes how I was affecting her and how we were trying to relate to each other. But this was something that I could only experience many years later, right? And it's something that becomes more and more acute. So this age that hangs over my head is the age of 52, which is the age that she passed away at very suddenly from a brain aneurysm. And so it's this age that's always hanging. So the closer I get, I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen when I turn 52, but in a way, it's like our bodies are merging and our grief is merging. And so something has been happening where now that I'm no longer on sabbatical, I have these moments where I'll have an intense feeling. And I realize, oh, it's not my feeling. It's actually my mom's feeling from a different moment in her life that's showing up through a feeling that I have, right? And so that's a different way of rewriting our stories together, but it's actually only something that I'm able to do because she's actually not here and because I've had this space, this intense, extreme condition, right, that I've lived through. So I think one question we're also asking is about hidden states, right? Like, what are all of the hidden states available in these liminal spaces, when we're dreaming, when we're sleeping, when we're dead, when we're not dead, right? All of that. And I think it's a question that we can ask differently, right? And we can keep asking. And so Lydia's gonna give us some portals to take home with you, but one exercise that I often do is sometimes I'll just take the same story and rewrite it over and over and over again. And not even the same story. I'm obsessed with sentences, so I'll rewrite the same sentence over and over and over again. So I'll take a sentence, and I might just write a sentence about a difficult memory. And then I'll rewrite that sentence now to say something else about my fears. And then I'll rewrite that sentence to say something about desire. And I'll rewrite that sentence again to say something about what has been hidden, what has been forgotten, what has been overlooked, right? Where the story is really beginning, where the story is really ending. I'll rewrite the story to say something about resilience, right? To say something about love. And I can keep doing that. And in each iteration, I'm rewriting the story, but I'm also getting to hold all of those other stories simultaneously, right? I think I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Is this where I do the to-go?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is it on the slides?
It is now.
Okay. I don't perfectly remember what this is, so I'm going to look at it too, okay? Just look away. Oh, yeah. Okay, so first thing to remember is that these are not just for writers who do the writing of the writing. These can also be meditation or exercise or conversation. Just go chat with somebody about it. Or, randomly text shit just to see what the reaction is. So it's not just about writing. Also painting, also music. There are versions of these that may or may not have anything to do with what you think of as writing, right? So the first one is, of course, about breathing and tough times or difficult memories, and related to the Ashola, being able to breathe more than one way. Can you write some little, or think some little, or sing some little, or paint some little fragments about reimagining different ways to breathe? And not to analyze it or yield some perfect product, just to let that in for a day and see. So that's what the first one is about. And then the second one, I am a whore for fairy tales. I love them so hard. It's crass. I could not love them more, partly because they're our oldest forms of storytelling. Well, I guess petroglyphs are, but you know what I mean. They're pretty old. Fairy tales, folk tales. I like how they first appeared as song. I wish we did that all the time. And dance. Except I'm a crap dancer, but anyway. So the second one I have found, it sounds hyperbolic, but it has saved my life so many times. To take something that has actually happened to me that seems unbearable and rewrite it in the ways Janice was talking about as a brief fairy tale. And you have to include supernatural or non-human elements into the fairy tale. So you're not limited by the tyranny of your actual experience. So like it has to have some wings coming on in there, or some breathing the bubbles, or some time travel. Got to get that in and rewrite the thing that happened as a story that is capable of moving and shape-shifting and breathing in 4 different ways. I mean, I'm going through a thing right now. I'm going through the demise of a very long relationship. And I thought I was dead, and I was dead, because I was going through a death cycle. And I'm beginning to find my air bubble. I'm not there yet, but I'm really close because I'm standing here doing this with you. I'm not underwater. Also, I'm not ashamed to speak publicly and openly about grief. It unites us and makes us like each other, not separate and different from each other. So this fairy tale, I think I've written like 700 fairy tales in the since October. That's how much I believe in it. And I don't know, do I look like a human? I feel like I've moved beyond human. I feel like I'm getting closer to the water, and can you see things that aren't human? Because I feel like I've grown them. Well, there's always this. But, you know, I'm on my way, and on my way is hope. And we're on our way culturally in the country, even though it looks like death. It's a death cycle, but we're on our way. And we're coming, we're already coming. So remind each other of that as often as you can. And these are the to-go bags. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, I think, do we have time for Q&A or? Okay. Okay. Thank you.